wars have rules. This war was genocidal because of the bombing of hospitals, refugee camps, and marketplaces. In one of the worst bombings in a place called Otuocha and Aguleri, I think it's in modern-day Anambra State, in one single day, about approximately 500 civilians were slaughtered. The war was also genocidal because of the rape of girls and women, the starvation of civilian populations, the murder of hundreds of unarmed boys and men in Asaba, economic blockades, also importantly, post-war economic victimizations and the seizure of property and businesses. The war would go on to claim an additional, estimates put this at up to 3 million lives. There are some important factors to take into account when we think about genocides. Genocides are predominantly the result of animosity and prejudice against an ethnic, religious, racial, or other group based on unfounded fears and perceived threats. In this regard, I would like to refer to the mention here is usually unfounded. And these are things that many of us here, if not all of us here in this room, can relate to. Also important is the fact that acts of genocide are almost always instigated by a political or religious leader. It's hardly the people themselves. Usually people live in harmony until acts of genocide are provoked by respected religious or political leaders. Another important aspect of genocide, and I'll put all of this together, is the fact that you must justify killing people. You have to justify your hatred for them. So you have to make up stories, and they're usually slanted and biased. They are greedy. They are thieves. They are liars. They are rapists. They like money too much. I've heard that once. As if there's any group of Nigerians who don't like money. Also important is the fact that the methods of elimination are brutal and vicious. They involve everything from massacre to torture, mutilation, poisoning, the use of disease, deportation, confinement, starvation, deprivation of political influence. Your political powers are taken from you, or your economic powers. You impose economic stagnation on a group of people. You take away from them their means of livelihood, or you occupy their lands and take over their lands. Now, like I said yesterday, occupation doesn't have to be physical. People can stay hundreds of miles away and exploit your oil or other resources. They don't have to be on your land. Now, to fully understand the use of genocide or mass murder as a weapon to get what people want in Nigeria, we need to look at history. And the aspect of history that I'd like to look at is the history of Islam in Nigeria. Now, when I talk about Islam, I'm not generalizing. I'm not saying anything bad about the faith. However, the manner in which a religion is introduced to a group of people determines the way it is perceived, the way it is utilized, and perhaps the way it is exploited.
Can you connect to radio?
I'm also going to talk about the Fulani who spread Islam, or who introduced Islam. Primarily, they primarily introduced Islam to northern Nigeria. I'll talk about that again without generalizing, I'm not talking about every single Fulani person out there. When we talk about racism in America, it's largely been executed, if you like, by people of European descent. But even when you talk about it, you can't generalize about all white people or people of European descent. However, back to Islam and the way it spread. In a place like Ghana, it spread largely through trade, through Hausa-speaking traders and the Mande people and other people. However, in Nigeria, it spread violently through the Fulani, and this is extremely significant. You would, if you reflect or think about it, there's hardly been any instance of violence or mass killings in Ghana involving Muslims, or you hardly hear of clashes between Muslims and other religious groups. It has a lot to do with how the faith was introduced. It was largely peaceful means. However, like I said, it spread in Nigeria, through northern Nigeria, largely through violence. Now, history tells us, and the dates may differ from person to person, that it was from around the 5th century that the Fulani would begin to migrate from areas around Morocco and Mauritania to settle in parts of Senegal in a place called Futatoro, and eventually they spread out. Now, from the 11th century, when Islam began to gain a stronghold in West Africa, the Fulani would embrace this faith. And as they embrace Islam, it would transform their interaction with people who they begin to see as infidels that they have a right to conquer, dominate, and convert. And so they begin to conquer territories from around the 17th century, around Senegal and Guinea. And then eventually they would begin to move eastward from maybe around the 16th century and would settle in what we understand to be the Hausa Kingdom in present-day Nigeria. And between 1804 and 1808, Usman Dan Fodio would carry out a jihad in Hausa land. He was successful. He had conquered the entire region except the Borno Empire, and he set up the Sokoto Caliphate, the original name being the Fula Sokoto Caliphate. The larger Hausa population came under Fulani control, and many were enslaved. Attempts by the Fulani to conquer territory southward was resisted by powerful territories like the Benin Kingdom and the Oyo Empire, even though they did make incursions eventually into the Oyo Empire, or at least parts of the Oyo Empire. And today you have a significant number of Muslims in southwest Nigeria. It was difficult for them to move south, partly because of the Middle Belt. The Middle Belt, because of its mountainous terrain, was a problem for the Fulani who fought on horseback. These were one of the first groups of West Africans to fight on horseback. So that slowed them down. However, by the 17th century, they were politically dominant in many parts of Africa. That includes a section of the great empire of Mali that they conquered and created what would eventually become the Massina Empire. They also conquered Timbuktu. And eventually, they would split up into emirates. Their empire would split up into emirates across the region. And today, they occupy several West and Central African countries, including the Sudan and even coastal areas around the Red Sea. They would also be slowed down by colonialism and by their defeat in places like Nigeria by the British. But here are important things to understand about this history. First of all, we understand from this history that the Fulani were very skilled fighters who fought on horseback. As they conquered and settled in new areas, they were introduced to new forms of wealth and political power, which they embraced. They adopted a philosophy, and it is safe to say that some of them may still uphold this philosophy, again without generalizing. And what is this philosophy? That they have the right to settle anywhere that offers them the economic and political and agricultural power that they crave. If land is not given to them freely, they have the right to take it violently, especially if it is occupied by infidels. This is all historical. I'm not making any of this up. Also, it is a fallacy to believe that they're just looking for grazing land. When they conquered the Hausa kingdom, did they just graze? No. They ruled, they took over economic power, political power, and they enslaved them. So we need to move past that notion that we have, that this is all about grazing. Now, just like the Fulani, the Arabs who introduced Islam to them were also predominantly desert nomads. Now, Islam united the Arabs, and as they spread the religion, they conquered and established political control in areas far beyond their lands. They became aware of the immense political, economic, and agricultural opportunities involved in creating new empires. Now, let's pause, and we'll now apply that history to some of the things that are happening today. With the coming of independence, new regional and ethnic rivalries and conflicts began to emerge. Now, prior to this time, it wasn't uncommon all across West Africa for people to have what I may refer to as stranger settlements. People were welcome as strangers to various lands, and they were given a place to stay. They were even allowed to have their own leaders as long as they honored the original owners of the land. So when we hear of Sabongari, for instance, in northern Nigeria, this is pre-colonial. This isn't something that just came up with colonialism. It always existed, and we have such settlements in places like the Ghanaian Empire, Mali, and so on and so forth. However, like I said, things will begin to change, and new ethnic rivalries and conflicts will begin to emerge as a result of colonialism. And the Fulani saw a threat and competition that they had to subdue, and that threat was the Igbo people. And I'm going to explain. Now, First of all, the Fulani had established a tradition of moving in large numbers and occupying new territories. So when they saw a group of people that seemed to be doing the same thing, those people became a threat. Now, why would the Igbos become a threat? You had many other people in settler communities in the north. But the Igbos stood out for a number of reasons. First of all, they were the largest in number. Secondly, they engaged in extensive commercial activity. They were very aggressive in their industrious pursuits, so to speak. And so, gradually, they were no longer seen as welcome settlers, but as competitors for the new economic and political powers introduced by colonialism. There are other reasons why the Igbos began to emerge as a threat. If you look at history, the first army officer was an Igbo man, Lieutenant Victor Woman. When graduates started to join the Nigerian army, the second after Olutoye was an Igbo man who would eventually become General Ojuku and the head of Biafran. First president, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first mathematician to receive international attention, Chikobi, who actually failed his, I think it was the equivalent of GC, he failed math, but went back. That was his motivation. The first woman to publish in the English language out of Africa, Foreign Wapa. Now, Professor Soyinka won the Nobel Prize, as did Albert Camus from Algeria. Chinua Achebe didn't, but Chinua Achebe is the best known writer coming out of the African continent. Chinua Achebe's novel, Things Fall Apart, is also the most widely read novel coming out of the African continent. There are other areas that the Igbos also began to establish themselves. And if you think about the history that I mentioned, it's either you appreciate them and interconnect with them, or you see them as a threat. Even in areas like sports, music, academics, you have a lot of people from different parts of Nigeria who excel. If you take the Igbos out, there'll be a gaping hole there, and I'm not saying it to brown-nose anybody, I'm saying it because it's the truth. Most importantly, the Igbo people occupied a region with a resource that was gaining global attention, and that's crude oil. And so, the first coup and Decree 34, and we can talk about this later on, have been used as reasons for genocide against Easterners, mainly Igbos, beginning in 1966. However, long before the coup, the Premier of the North, and is it ironic that he was Fulani, Sir Ahmadu Bello, in an interview expresses his absolute disdain for the Igbos. Now, I've listened to that interview, and honestly, I would sympathize with him if he said, you know what, since Igbo people came here, they've been burning down our mosques. Armed robbery has gone up. They've been raping our girls. But he doesn't say that. He actually says great things about the Igbo people. He says they want to aspire to be the best. Okay. So this is something we all aspire for, all things being equal. Except there's something wrong with you. You want to be the best. And that's what we teach our children if you're raising any children. To be the best. Now let's remember that the Sultana of Sokoto was the equivalent of a crown prince, and when he spoke, he became the voice of his people. When he spoke, people listened to him because he was very powerful religiously and politically. Though this interview has been captured on YouTube, that's the one we see. What are the chances that that's the only time that he declared his hatred for Igbo people? He was probably on a campaign. And what are the chances that he was the only one? Now let's remember that Ahmadu Bello was also the one who said, and I quote, "We, the people of the North, will continue our stated intention to conquer the South and to dip the Quran in the Atlantic Ocean after the British leave our shores." And we now make the connection. You see the connection I'm making between his people feeling threatened and the history of using violence and mass murder to get what people want. Essentially, the process for genocide was already taking place long before 1966. All they needed were reasons to implement it. And the reasons came with the first coup and Decree 34. Now let's think about Decree 34. If you ask those howling mobs who were running around and destroying people's lives and homes, if you ask any of them to provide us with the tenets of Decree 34, how many of them would be able to? How do you kill for what you don't even understand? Now, it was genocidal because of the nature of the killings. It was vicious. At this time, or soon after this period, my family had escaped, first from Kaduna and then Lagos, back to the east, and refugees were coming from the north, and their stories were consistent of people's eyes being gouged out, people cut in half, being beheaded. And even when the people agreed to leave, they went to the motor parks, they went and waited there for them and slaughtered them. They went to the train station. So it just wasn't about killing. You see, all you need is a stab wound or a bullet to the head. But when you start gouging out eyes or ripping the wombs of women and ripping out children from their wombs, it's something else. It's not just about killing. Now the war provided another channel to achieve what hadn't been accomplished in the massacres in the north. And like I said, wars lead to destruction, but wars also have rules. You see, Hitler is not accused. Nobody accuses him of any crime when it comes to German soldiers fighting against British or American soldiers. His crime is what he did to civilian Jews. Now remember that genocide doesn't involve a one-time massacre of people. It is a continuous process that seeks to destroy in several ways. Before the war even started, the authority of Igbos in the military was completely eliminated. Now remember that the Igbos were trailblazers, and many other people from the southeast. At the end of the war, I'm not even sure if there was any Igbo officer that was up to the rank of major. I think perhaps most were captain and down. Those that were reabsorbed to their pre-war ranks. That is why someone like Bitu Kiwe served under Babangida, that he was higher in rank too before the war. He was the equivalent of a captain in the Navy, that's a lieutenant, while they were lieutenants in the army. He was higher in rank than them. Families were destroyed. The fragmentation of the East was accomplished, which was part of the reason why states were given to us. I said yesterday, nobody gave me Southeastern state because they loved me. It was so that I would hate you. So that was accomplished. We don't have to go into abandoned property, or the 20 pounds, or the fact that at the end of the war, we didn't have a political voice. So our communities were decimated. Genocide is about destroying lives, not just killing people. It is about keeping people down in several ways, educationally, politically, economically. At the end of the war, they had control of the oil industry, political power, economic power, and military power. That's a lot. However, one of the things a war criminal hates is to fail in his attempts at genocide. You see, during the war, the survival of Biafrans infuriated and frustrated our enemies. And after the war, from nothing, the people of Biafra have rebuilt themselves and now excel in academics, business, the arts, literature, technology, IT, sports, and so forth. I don't know if any of you have followed news on the cut-off marks that are required for someone who takes JAM from Kano State and from maybe Imo State. Let's not even go into that because we'll be here all day. But you know what I mean. So it infuriated them. You know, it infuriates those who meant to completely subdue and dominate you and myself, and that is our victory. And this is also why any mention of Biafra, even as a subject of history, causes them much anxiety and rage. Now, with the way things are today, it is safe to say or to suspect that at least segments of the Fulani population have not entirely abandoned their mission of conquering and dominating. Today, we also need to be aware that they have more resources available to them than they've ever had, including the sympathy of extremists who practice the dominant religion practiced by the Fulani, which is Islam. Again, I'm not indicting the faith. You know the KKK in the United States, this white supremacist group, is a Christian group. So when we condemn them, we're not condemning all Christians. And so I just want that to be noted. If, God forbid, there's a war, rest assured that there are many out there who are not necessarily Fulani who will turn against us because they share something in common. And that is the fact that they see us as infidels. Okay, I'll move on. After that break in transmission, let us recognize the power and international influence of the Fulani. More heads of state in Nigeria have been Fulani. Salah Mohammed, Yaradua, Maru Yaradua, Shagari, and of course in modern times, Buhari. We also have in Nigeria the largest number of Fulani. There are probably about maybe 12 to 15 million, but in reality they are a minority group. And we need to stop talking about Hausa Fulani. Nothing like that exists. As a matter of fact, not a single Hausa has been head of state in Nigeria. So they are really a minority group, perhaps about the population of the Ijaw people. Now here are some other facts. Who's the president of Senegal? Macky Sall, Fulani. The president of Gambia, Adama Barrow, Fulani. The vice president of Sierra Leone, Mohamed Julde Jallo, Fulani. The prime minister of Mali, Babou Cissé, Fulani. And who is the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Amina J. Mohammed, from Nigeria? There you go. The President-elect of the United Nations General Assembly, Tijani Mohamed Bande, and the Secretary General of OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting, Mohamed Sanusi Bakindo. What oil is produced in his land? Well, like I said before, nobody has to come and occupy your land or my land to take away our resources. There are different ways of occupation. At the end of the day, however, this is not necessarily just about the Fulani and Fulani herdsmen. On the issue of genocidal acts of destruction during the war, our reactions, we should be angry, but we should not be restricted to anger and vengeance. First, we need to be armed with knowledge. Because if you don't understand the history of the problem, how do you address the problem? And like I said yesterday, even as we look to the possibility of geographical autonomy, first of all, we need to advocate and rely on the Biafran spirit. If you don't have that, I'm sorry to say, I'm not insulting anybody. If you don't have that and you're wearing an emblem, it's like a Christian or someone wearing a crucifix who's a murderer and a liar and a rapist. I don't believe that's what we are. So the Biafran spirit, let's try and list some of them. Creativity, invention, diligence, service, togetherness, fearlessness, integrity, hard work, self-sacrifice, resilience, and determination. I would like to start from there, because those are noble qualities that will ultimately determine how we function as a people and as a nation. We also need to start arguing that we were being pushed away. We were not separated. You see, we need to be careful about buying into the mindsets of other people. The Jewish people packed their bags and left Germany. Has anybody ever referred to them as separatists? No. We must also, we said this yesterday, don't allow them to make you describe this experience, the Biafra experience, as an Igbo experience. Definitely, Igbo people were the primary victims. The Igbo people are virtually the only ones after the war that have been bold enough to keep the story alive. I agree. And the Igbo people suffered perhaps more than any other group of people. However, minorities so-called, and I use that term very loosely, were significant, played fundamental roles in Biafra from the beginning to the end. Whether in leadership positions or whether as foot soldiers, however you want to look at them. My own father's younger brother, Gabriel Linton, was a sergeant in Biafra. So this is not about Igbo people rising up and trying to disrupt Nigeria and create disunity and dominate everyone, including the minorities around them. But you see, that's the narrative. We don't want to accept nonsense. Because we're smarter than that. This is also not the time to isolate ourselves. Nothing will be achieved if we isolate ourselves. This is the time to regain pre-colonial interconnections with ourselves and our neighbors. This was the substance of my talk recently in Effiong. We need to be willing to engage in the exchange of ideas with those who disagree with us. We may have disagreements with our own brothers and sisters, but they are not our enemies. Disagreements don't make us enemies. Those who are your enemies are those who want to destroy you and historically have proven that they want to destroy you. Focus on them. Don't focus on your brothers and sisters. Where are you? So please, it may take a lot of readjusting to understand that disagreements, even with those who disappoint us, are not our enemies. We can't start making enemies of our own people when we have a bigger problem. That enemy is only going to take advantage of our inability to get on with one another. They did it in the past and they'll do it again. So there may be people we disagree with, maybe blue or white collar workers, they may be governors, they may be chiefs, they may be politicians, they may be all these things, but I would hesitate to make them my enemies. But I'm also not letting the leaders and elders off easily. Because if you're a leader and you're an elder, when you see people agitating, people are uncomfortable about things, and people are demanding self-determination, just because you disagree with them, you don't turn around and try to silence them and condemn them dismiss them, attack them, punish them, or even kill them. That's not the nature of the leader. Those are not the qualities of a leader or of an elder. What you do is you engage them, and you reassure them, and you enter into dialogue with them.
Yes, sir.
So you are not innocent yourself, leaders and elders. Please, we've been told that we are enemies. Job people, Ikwere, Effiong, Ejagam, Ibibi, and others. We are not. We have lived next to each other and shared so much in common for centuries in terms of food, clothing, arts, language, spirituality, music, dance, you name it. To defeat the current epidemic of violence that is coming closer and closer to us, to overcome our political and economic challenges, we cannot isolate ourselves and must work together, otherwise we could be victims of another genocide. It may appear far-fetched, but nothing is impossible. I want us to refer to what's often, and I referred to it yesterday, what's often referred to as the 1929 about women's riots. This revolution in 1929 may have started around about, but eventually from one end of the eastern region to the other, all women were involved. And I said my own grandmother participated in that movement, and she was an Igbo woman. These women didn't have money, they didn't have power, they didn't have guns. What did they have? Unity. That was their power. Wow. Think about it. Today, if there were a crisis, and maybe some Effiong women tried to gather women from the eastern region, Ikwere women, Ibibio women, Anang women, Igbo women, will it work? No. Something has happened. And we need to restore to ourselves what we had before. And so, these women succeeded in getting the colonial regime to change a number of its repressive taxation policies. Another thing I think we should start doing is looking for other ways to connect. You see, language, culture, those are natural. But those are not the only ways to connect. As a matter of fact, if some of us sitting down here are honest to ourselves, some of the most devious things that have been done to us have been done to people in our own communities. I'm not saying don't connect with people from your communities. I'm saying let's look for other ways. You see, there are many other ways we can connect. We can connect through the interests that we share. Some people may be interested in Oracle. Some people may be interested in building cars. If you're interested in anything, you're not limited by ethnicity. You'll see someone at the end of the world who is interested in that same thing. So I would like to encourage us as we move forward to consider diversifying the methods by which we connect with other people. If we limit it to just language and culture and who looks like me and who sounds like me, we're going to keep limiting ourselves. This one is a little tough, but I'll say it. You know, when my father, when they went after him in Kaduna, and he eventually escaped in disguise, this was during the second coup, a lot of the people who helped him were not Ibibio. They were northerners, his brigade major, Major Obemudia, who later became a governor. You see, I can't ignore some of those sentiments. It's a reminder that even when we talk of our enemies, we should take a step back and say, well, even within our enemies, there's some that have a good heart for us. I met a man recently who's passionate about protecting women in Chibok. young women. You remember that's where they kidnapped about 200 of them some years ago. I don't even know what language this man speaks, but I immediately connected to him because I have 3 daughters. And so when I see someone passionately working towards the protection of the sacredness of young women, I'm immediately connected to that person. So let's diversify the means by which we connect to other people. I'm not saying we should be foolish about it. Let's be wise about it. Now, whether it is past genocides or the potential for future genocides, we must also stop isolating problems. You see, at some point in Nigeria, Abacha was a problem. At some point, it was Boko Haram. At one point, it was military dictatorships. But we can't isolate these problems. All these problems are interconnected. You couldn't have, you wouldn't have the Fulani herdsmen problem. That's now the one a lot of people are talking about. You wouldn't have that problem if you didn't have problems with our security agencies. That's the source of that problem. There is no reason why civilians can't be defeated by our military and our mobile police. It just doesn't make sense. We also need to understand that there's also a larger problem of bigotry. The Fulani herdsmen, I even spoke to someone from the north who said, listen, we deceive ourselves if we do not know that they are being supported by some very powerful individuals and forces. So there's a problem of bigotry. There's a problem, when you talk about military rule, there's a larger problem of corruption. When you talk about the military and military rule, there's also a larger problem of the failure of our judicial system. What I'm trying to establish here is let's stop isolating problems, but let's find the connections. I think we're better equipped when we find connections, the connections between these problems, to actually address them. Another one that's difficult is to look at ourselves. This is very important, but it's not easy. I'm not a saint, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. But I love that statement in the Bible. First take out... No. You take out the log from your eye before you take out the speck from someone else's eye. If I must condemn power abuse among northern leaders, like a lot of my people do, I must also talk about power abuse among leaders in my own community.
Yes.
If I must talk about violent Fulani herdsmen, I must talk about the violence of kidnappers in my community. If I must talk about genocide against my people, I must talk about the crisis of child witches that once existed in my state, Akwa Ibom, where there were genocidal attacks on children. How many of you are aware of that incident? So, self-examination is extremely important. It's not an easy thing, but it's necessary. Now, let me start by speaking not just to you, but to other people who are not in this room. And this is crucial when we think of genocide. A lot of people out there must stop being hypocrites, and I'm tired of listening to these hypocrites come out and complain about Fulani herdsmen. They want attention and sympathy now that their communities are being attacked. But where were they when similar atrocities were committed against my people? They need to shut up. You see, in Nazi Germany, the Nazis claimed they were trying to create an Aryan nation made up of the perfect European. But they were happy to use the Japanese, who are not Europeans, to fight their wars. I feel nothing but empathy for the people of Benue State. It was through Benue they opened the channels by which the genocidal attack started. When they came in through Nsukka and Gakem, it was through Benue. And my brother, Dr. Unoke, can tell us about some of the killings. You know, when some people escaped from the north, it was at Jos that they were apprehended and butchered. Now, a lot of these people complaining, some of their communities were even instrumental in committing similar acts of brutality against my people. You know, what kind of unity were the people of Benue State fighting for when those with whom they supposedly fought with for unity are now butchering them? Tell me what kind of unity it was. So now, what was it? Was it Aruga? What is it, that program? Aruga, what is it? Aruga. My brother, I don't, anyway, we can add the A if we want. Now they're coming to Benue and saying, and the Benue people are saying, no, we don't want you here. What's your problem with the people that you're supposedly united with? You need to stop insulting our intelligence and trying to justify the murder of our people by saying it was unity. If you want to unite with us, treat us with respect and justice. Unity will come naturally. Back then, their friends were the same Fulani they are now complaining about. And let me ask them, more recently, what have they said when pro-Biafran groups, whether it's IPOP or others, when their members, whether you agree or disagree with them, when their members were being physically assaulted and even murdered, what did they say?
Nothing.
They forget that chickens will always come home to roost. But I still have nothing but empathy for the people of Benue. So essentially, many of you speak, not you. Many of you speak about these issues as selfish hypocrites. Not because you care, but because the danger is now coming close to you. We must seriously condemn the violence being committed by any group. We must condemn past acts of communal violence and even call for overdue restitution. We have a right to make that, whether they give it to us or not. Otherwise, and I'm going to end here, many of us are going to keep asking the question, why should we unite with you or even feel sorry for you when it comes to fighting this new enemy? After all, you were not with us when we were being viciously attacked and killed. Let that be a lesson for them. Thank you so much.
IPOB, IPOB, one family. I really thank Professor Phillip Effiong. I wouldn't say junior. I don't need to add to that. So what we have to do now, quickly because of time, is to ask Professor Ewa Nuki to also come and talk to us. And then when you finish, I do a quick roundup, and then we sit them down and we talk. Because if you start asking a question, I think we will leave here till tomorrow. Yes, but let's watch the time. So please, one more round of applause for Prof. I think most of you were here yesterday. When I was scouring for those who would come and talk to us in the Genocide exhibition, I didn't want to be in-house. I managed to contact Prof. Phillip Effiong. He said he knows somebody who's also a Biafran. I said, who's this guy? Someone, he gave me Dr. It's actually Professor Iwa Inoke. So I phoned him. He said, are you one of the IPOB people? I said, yes. Here's, I sent the flyer to him. I don't think he bothered what we wrote on it, but he says he's coming. I said, what? He has just been to Liberia for this summer. Come and sit down, sir, because I could get carried away. He has just been to Liberia to set up a school this summer. It's about to start college. And then I said, there's something about Biafra. He says, what's come? I said, are you sure? I said, yeah, I find a way. I said, yes, that's Biafrans. But I won't go into too much detail how he found a way. But remember, he was also accompanied by Professor Pamela. We are really, really grateful for these two people who joined Prof. Phillip Effiong. And I want him to say he knows how to use time. Just tell us his own version. He was in BOF, and he spoke to the person who formed BOF, who has a message for us. Is that right? Okay, so I'm going to stop talking, give him the mic, and after that, we'll quickly song. Thank you, sir.
I bring you greetings. I was a member, I am a surviving member of the Biafran Organization of Freedom Fighters. When AGK Aranya returned on vacation in Biafra, His Excellency, our leader, Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, invited him to the State House, Government House, and said to him, this war is not going as we planned it, because Abakaliki has fallen. So Biafra started to starve. The fighting soldiers had no more food, because Abakaliki was the food basket of the eastern region. Nigeria, in fact. That's how BOF was founded. To train soldiers, boys and girls, who would stay when the Nigerian soldiers conquer any area. We are still at the back. So the Nigerian soldiers owned the roads where they conquered, but most of 99% of our people in the conquered areas, we were with them and they were for Biafra. So we fought behind the enemy lines. But before I go into more details, let me just inform you that I live at the state of Kansas. I'm the chair of the Political Science Department and Pre-Law Programs of Kansas City, Kansas Community College. I got my PhD from Howard University, Washington, D.C. I'm a lion. Some of you here can see. Can you show your hands? Any lion here? Yeah. Look at this guy. I'm lioness. Lionesses. Yes. So briefly, can you give me, let me just pre-warn you that in the United States you're given 1 hour to speak, but you speak between 7 to 15 minutes. And then the rest is question time. If not, you get people exhausted. And it's like committing a sin to read your papers. Because most of the people you're talking to can read and write. So we can learn from each other, really, what we're doing in the United States and learn from you what you're doing here. I'm not condemning anybody, but that's just sharing ideas. Let me make brief announcements quickly. Onwamibe, I want you people not to forget his story. Why people like us who were houseboys in Lagos, who were hawkers, when we returned to Biafra, we went to government house and said, why did we say that? It was because two things happened. On one occasion, the train returning to the east from Jos, from Ugwausa, carried a headless body. This headless body belonged to Onwamibe. Onwamibe, you see his name, Onwamibe. He ran from Kano, Kaduna, and when he reached the train at Jos, the thief people dragged him out and beheaded him. They took his head till today and left his trunk in the train and said, go and show this body to Juku. That's how we treat Nyamiri. So I want us to remember, we've done so many books. You have what we call Igbo Association of Igbo Studies or something like that. And Phillip and I have attended several meetings in Washington, D.C., Marquette University, presenting papers. There were people who came from Australia who talk about the PhD holder from Australian University who heard the Biafran story when he was 7 years old. And because of that, he did his PhD on Biafra. He attended that conference. A young lady with PhD also from Ireland also attended because she said, each time she did not eat her food, the mother would say, eat your food before you look like a Biafran child. Nobody will know. Nobody will know, that's what we want. So I don't want us to forget these things. One thing I have not told you is that I'm one of the 14 advisory members of the U.S. Civil Rights Committee. So we are 14 of us who advise the government of Kansas State on civil rights issues. So because of this, while pursuing my doctoral studies at Washington, D.C., there was a case in Nigeria, you must have heard it about Amina Powell. Sorry, Amina Lawal. Amina Lawal slept with an Hausa man, sorry, Phillip, I don't know who is Sao, who is So, the irony is that they condemned the woman for committing adultery. Yeah, Sharia law. And then they left the man alone because you have to produce 4 Muslim men to give testimony. So, I got 4 men. Yes, so they can show witness in the court.